there's nothing worse, in my opinion, as a student who was very concerned about my grades. There's nothing worse than doing like the ultimate dumb thing.
Yes.
And several of you are very guilty of that on this quiz. Your work was masterful. It was inspirational.
Thank you so much.
It showed
I feel like
multiple levels of genius. And then it asked, which is the longest side? And several of you wrote 23.
Oh my God.
You need to check
Yeah.
all the sides. 45 would have been the longest side,
No,
right?
that's 45 centimeters. That's
Okay.
23
No,
inches.
All right,
Yeah.
well,
45 inches.
guys,
They were too used to having
Stop.
it.
so I think the thing that you learn is to be a little careful. The third side is not necessarily the longest side. If I say a consecutive integer problem, yes, the third consecutive integer is necessarily the largest consecutive integer. When I do sides of a triangle, such is not the case. Okay? Any questions? Nobody caught on to this, which is pretty good, but this triangle is actually impossible.
Because it has to be like.
Yeah.
Any two sides have to be greater than the third,
Yeah.
and it didn't work out that way. If you have 12 and 23, it only adds up to 35. But nobody really caught on to it, and I think it's beyond the parameters of what we have going on.
You're gonna get fired.
Okay, now, it's time. We are going to take a radical shift, super radical shift,
Wow.
in terms of the kind of content that we've been covering.
Gnarly,
This,
dude.
this course is highly based on functions. And up until now, we've been trying to understand concepts like domain and range and how to operate with these functions in an algebraic fashion. Now, we're going to shift gears and get into operating with this function, with functions in more of a graphic understanding. So, we are going to begin our study of y equals mx plus b, which you really should know the fundamentals from last year. And one of the big differences that I see in teaching, years ago when we first started teaching, at least one marking period, and maybe a marking period and a half every year, was spent reviewing the work from the previous year. And as time has gone on, and particularly now with the Common Core, you really don't do that. We assume you remember from last year. So we're going to mention stuff and give brief reminders, but we're not going to do what we used to do. In the past, we would spend quite a bit of time on reviewing y equals mx plus b and the general equation of a line and slope and y-intercept. Now, of course, we're going to review it quickly, but you're really expected to have a very strong understanding of that from last year. So we will get into graphic representations, and you have a test the Thursday before the Christmas break, which is, I believe, the 22nd. I'm leaving the Friday open in case somebody needs to take the test because they missed class, or it is the day before the Christmas break, and it generally is not a good day for kids to focus in class. So that will be our next test date, and that's why the relearn packets are due on the 15th. I don't want anything to interfere with your preparation that week for that test, okay? Yes?
I'm sorry, but like a 92 or 93 be worth doing a relearn for?
I think to answer that question, you have to do one of three things. First, you have to ask yourself just how important 100 is to you.
Really important.
And then you have to ask yourself, does your history suggest that you're going to get at least a 93 or higher? Because if you're someone like that's prone to the careless mistake, then you could go down with a grade like a 93. And it's the second grade that counts, period. And the other problem is, how does it relate to the time you have for all of your subjects? And you need to balance all of that off in your mind and decide, you know, if it's worth doing it to go from, say, I never count on 100 because most people do something stupid on everything. So let's say 96, you know, is it worth doing that, or are you comfortable hanging in there with a 93? That's up to you. One thing is you guys get a couple of points added to your average if you do all of your homeworks. So if you get all your homeworks done, now I don't give you a couple of points added if you get a 98 or a 99. But for everybody down, if you get a 97, 98, 99, I'm liable to give you 1 point. 99, you really better have like 99.4 to get that last point to get to 100. But the ones who are lower than that, we give the points to. All right, so this is kind of along the lines of what Colonel LaRock spoke about with you guys the other day and went over with you guys. Very much an application where we're graphing two things at the same time. It's called simultaneous solutions graphically, finding them. Okay, Nick, your test is on the ground there, buddy.
Oh,
And
thank you.
unfortunately, it photocopied so that these two lines look to be the same color, but someone in the last class said, how can you tell which one's cost and which one's revenue?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, no, it very much matters. Go ahead.
I actually used one of the questions. There's probably more logical way to do this, but it says in letter B, it says, what is the meaning of the .04,000 on total cost line? Or
Okay.
the line that goes to the .04,000.
Good, yeah, that's a great way, getting a hint from a question.
I think that the way I did is that you can't really start with revenue. Revenue will always be at zero
That's right,
because you've never made any money.
that's right. When you've
Wow.
sold nothing, you've made nothing. So 0 has to be the revenue, okay? Jeff?
Another way is that we could just ask you.
This is a possibility, but what if they gave you one on the test and then you needed to figure it out without? When the Regents comes along, I'm not even allowed in the room.
They do that.
Wow.
So
You should be.
they will not answer such a question, okay? I'll be in there to get you started, and the minute we say begin the test, I leave.
Wait, when is the Regents?
June.
Oh.
Okay.
Right now.
Does this have to do with this?
Sorry.
All right, so now we have a red graph and a blue graph, and the blue graph is revenue, it's the amount of money taken in. The red graph is the cost to produce. Now, another way to look at it is this. Let's say that you wanted to cut lawns and start your own lawnmower business or lawn cutting business. And
Yeah, that's fine.
it costs you, or let's do another one that is very realistic for kids, because nowadays there's lots of landscapers. When I was a kid, no, I'm talking about when you're 13, 14. When I was a kid, we used to constantly cut lawns for the neighborhood, but nowadays there's landscaping businesses all over the place.
Wow.
When, one that, like if I was 12 or 13 again, I would give a lot of thought to doing, is plowing people's driveways when the snow hits. And I would go one step further, and I would look at buying a snowblower.
What if you already have one?
Now, well, if your parents will let you use it. Now, personally, I wouldn't let my 12-year-old use a snowblower.
I used
I wouldn't let my
snowblower before, and
13-year-old
I
use a
sucked.
snowblower.
I
Because
wouldn't
there's a
let
pretty good
you- I
chance they're gonna
snowblower.
break it, and I don't want it broken. So
Sean, would you
anyway,
let me use the snowblower?
so if you were to buy a snowblower, it probably cost around $500. So, God
Bless you.
That would be like starting at the point zero comma 500. Bless you.
Bless you.
Because you have not plowed a single driveway, and you've spent $500. Okay? However, from that point forward, the only thing you need to buy is gas. And gas, compared to how much you're gonna make for the driveways, is
1 trillion
relatively cheap. So what you can do is you can go up to each neighbor, depending on the size of the driveway, and you could say a small driveway costs you $20, a medium driveway costs you $40, and a big driveway costs you $60.
100.
And then you could go in there, and each driveway you do, you get paid money for. But you still don't make any profit until the revenue, the amount of money you bring in, crosses over the graph of expenses. This would be, say, how much it costs to buy the snow blower, but then you do have to pay a little bit for gas each time you do a driveway, okay? So this is a very real-life situation, and in terms of Colonel LaRock, when he presented based on the power compared to the cost, and then he compared those two things. All right, so what are revenue and total costs related to the number of units in the coffee produced? So at this point in time, they're looking for you to consider equations for each of these. Namely,
Y equals mx plus c.
now what does M stand for?
Oh,
Everybody.
that means the slope.
So, what does B stand for?
Y-intercept.
Now, a phrase with the coming of the Common Core that they use for slope, Noah, a phrase they use for slope is rate of change. They use that phrase a lot, and we've done a lot of rate of change problems where we've looked at graphs. You might have the instinct of saying here that the rate of change is 3/5, and you're wrong. you're not just going up 3 here. When we say up 3 over 5, we assume each box is 1. This is not up 3, this is up how much?
2,000.
How much?
6,000.
6,000 over 500.
500.
So, if I do 6,000 over 500,
That's 60,000.
sorry, die. 60 divided by 12 is 5. So I'm gonna get
60
y
divided
equals
by 12 is
12x.
5.
Now, what that means in a nutshell is that, and again, we're doing the blue line, that means every mug is gonna cost $12. Okay? And finally, the y-intercept is 0, so we just leave it at y equals 12x. Now, for the red line, again, y equals mx plus b. This time, I'm gonna go up 1 unit, but 1 unit is worth how much?
2,000
2,000
buckaroos.
over 5. So 2,000 over, 500.
500.
Die, and I get 4.
Four.
So this is
Four.
y equals 4x, but it doesn't stop there. What do I also have to include?
Oh, the y-intercept.
The y-intercept. I have to add in my factor for b.
4,000.
It starts right here, so that would be plus 4,000. Okay? And by the way, there is also a graphic solution to this, an algebraic, I'm sorry. You take the 12x, you equal to 4x plus 4,000. You get 8x equals 4,000, divide and you get 500. And lo and behold, this is the answer to part B. It says, what is the meaning of the point 0, 4,000? Oh, I'm sorry, part C. That means when you haven't made any yet, it costs you $4,000 to get started. And what are the coordinates of the intersection point?
0, 4,000.
This is, no, the intersection point is 500, 6,000.
Oh.
And what this means, it's very important, look, the x-coordinate represents the units produced and sold, and the dollars represents the amount of money taken in. So what this means is, when you have sold 500 mugs, the amount you've taken in is equal to the amount that you had to pay to get started. This is your break-even point. This is where your revenue has equaled your cost. And from this point forward, because you take in $12 every time you sell a mug, and it only costs you $4 to produce, from this point forward, from the 501st mug on, profit. Yes?
Are you gonna ever ask us questions where we have to put tax into the whole thing?
If so, at this point, we're doing everything graphic. So if there was tax, and if there was everything else, it would be represented within the graph. Okay? Now, next, part D, create linear equations for revenue and total cost. We did that. And what does part E say?
Profit.
Selling 1,000
Profit
units
of
equals
for
revenue
selling.
generated by selling 1,000 units minus the total cost. 1,000 units, what is the today's profit of 1,000, if 1,000 units are produced and sold?
Okay, so look, if I do 1,000 units, there's a couple of different ways to do it. I can plug it into the formulas, but a really easy way to do it is this. The profit is right here.
Wow.
The profit is the difference between the graphs.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm going from 12,000 to 8,000.
4,000.
Profit is
Bless me.
$4,000, okay? Any questions?
No, sir.
All right, so up until now, we've done situations where we have put one graph on a graph at a time, and we've asked to infer information from that. Now we have put 2 at one time. The quiz that you took today was just a review of word problems. The next quiz that you take will be very much like the questions on the pre-test and on the test about here's a graph, where is it increasing, where's a max, where's a min, blah, blah, blah. And that's the next 2 graphs, and then after that, we begin to get into next 2 quizzes. After that, we begin to get into simultaneous situations. Okay, so what we're really going to talk about today is the concept of slope, or the concept of, Jeffrey, a rate
Concept
of
of
change.
Jeffrey.
Rate of change, they love to use the terminology rate of change, particularly average rate of change, but with a slope or a linear function. It's the same. They love to use the terminology now rate of change. So you need to be able to associate that in your mind as slope. Now, there are 2 different ways to do slope, and they're both legitimate, okay? As time goes on, we want to do it more the analytic way, which is to use a formula. But we could graph it and just use the graph as an initial way to understand. So here's the point -2, 4. and here's the point, 3, 6. We're asked to find the slope of the line that connects those two. Now, I don't know why it's going so slow. One formula for slope is rise
Overrun.
over run.
I know
Okay.
another one.
Now, all you need to do is look at the picture and start to count. So if I go from here to here, okay, I'm literally gonna go up 2 over 5. So in this particular situation, we would say that the slope is, the rise is 2, because you're going up 2,
Oh, man.
and the run is 5. So it's up 2 over 5. Now, there are very big advantages to doing it that way. You could just look and see the slope, all right? I did that on the last graph. When I said I went up 3, but 3 was really 6,000, over 5, but 5 was really 500, and then we reduced. So this is something that'll never go away, but a lot of times they don't give you spare graph paper. A lot of times it would take longer to graph. So what we
I got
learned to
this.
do is this formula. And some people write change in y over change in x, like triangle y, triangle x, and that's all well and good. But the
Y
one
two.
that's most popular is this one.
Why, amen.
And the first time that kids begin to see this particular formula, the sub 2s and the sub 1s, the little numbers on the
I
bottom there,
thought they were excellent.
can be bothered. Yeah, they can be bothersome to kids. So what I want you to understand is that they're called subscripts. Years ago, when I was at Bayport High School, we had what I consider to be the greatest math teacher I've ever seen in the history of the universe, a guy by the name of Mr. Braze.
Mr. Lindquist.
And Mr. Braze, he used to turn around and he would never call his kids. Now, aren't there 2 Nicks in here?
Yeah.
Okay. You would never be Nick Cristofaro, and you would never be Nick Oken.
I'm Nick
You would be
Cristofaro.
Nick sub 1, and you would be Nick sub 2. Purely alphabetical. Now, my name was obviously Robert or Bob or Bobby.
Bobbert.
And
Yes.
growing up, my best friend's name was also Bob or Robert or Bobby. And I was, because my last name was Lindquist and his was Von Aken, I was Bob sub 1 and he was Bob sub 2. So I believe when Mr. Brace signed my yearbook, and I certainly know he did it in letters that he wrote to me, he would address me as Bob sub 1. All right? So, hold it, listen. All you need to do is subtract the y from the second minus the 1. Hey, don't move. Do not sit. One of the points is the second, one is the first. So I just do 6 minus 4 over 3 minus negative 2, which is 2/5. Either way gets it all done. All right? Hasta la vista, vaya con Dios.
Toodaloo, ta-ta.
Arrivederci.
Smile a lot. Ciao.
Arrivederci. Adios, amigos y amigas.
Cheerio.
Garushus.
Kudafis.
Enjoy. Have fun. Hasta la bye-bye.
Hasta
See ya.
Get out of my classroom.
Yo, Nick, come on, hurry up.
Hi, Nick.
I got you.
I don't get
Be there in a minute.
thankful